3:15 a.m., January 7th, 2026. 200 miles out from Moscow. Inside his cockpit, a Ukrainian F-16 pilot observes his instruments illuminating like neon as a Russian S-400 battery locks on hard. What was meant to be a stealth approach has been transformed by a single radar signature into a race for survival at high speed. Before a Mach 6 interceptor arrives at his location, he's got precisely 42 seconds to hit the release point for his Storm Shadow missile. This has evolved beyond just a bombing run. It's become a frantic dash against the planet's most concentrated network of air defense to catch the check Moscow had been anticipating. Tonight's target sits at 16 Prospect Birnogo, East Moscow. For a casual observer, it appears as just another sprawl of industry. For the Kremlin, however, it represents MMPP Salute, the Russian Air Force's beating heart. The birthplace of AL-41 F-1S engines is here. Without these 32,000-pound thrust beasts, the Su-35 wouldn't be able to perform its aerial dance. Should these assembly lines cease, Russia's most lethal fighter jet production doesn't merely slow down, it dies completely. Yet there's a reason this facility has never been successfully struck. A no-fly zone so dense it could make a ghost perspire wraps around Moscow. The S-400 Triumph system we're discussing claims it can spot a sparrow at the atmosphere's edge. Flying into this web is typically viewed as a one-way journey to a flaming crater. How do you crack an impossible equation like this? A massive swarm and prayers for luck would be most commanders' approach. The SBU operates under a different philosophy though. When a magic trick will do, why resort to a hammer? Just 2 F-16s carry tonight's mission on their wings. That's all. 2. On paper, it appears as an impossible mission gamble, but the Russian high command hasn't factored in a hidden variable in their calculations. The Echo Pulse strategy, 5 waves of drones. Like mushrooms on every high-rise rooftop, cancer loops are appearing everywhere. It appears like attempting an impossible level game, but the Ukrainian pilots are amused because the first pulse has already launched. At 200 feet, the F-16s remain low, the trilene hugging them to evade the S-400's long-range detection, while toward the city, a phantom fleet of 40 Paleonitsia drones is already screaming. Here's the twist, though. These aren't merely drones. They're components of what's called the Echo Pulse, a tactical nightmare. 4:40 a.m. The Russian countryside's freezing silence shatters as into the river valleys leading to Moscow, the first pulse of Paleonitsia drones descends. At a terrifying altitude of just 100 feet, these 700-pound hybrids scream at 560 miles per hour, the water hugging them. Into 5 distinct pulses of 8 units each, Ukraine has split its 40-drone Phantom fleet. Leading the charge right now are Pulse 1 and Pulse 2. For a radar operator, this appears as a desperate, amateurish swarm. That's precisely what the SBU intends for them to perceive. Sacrificial lambs map the radar. At Moscow's outer perimeter, toward the threat, an S-400 battery's 92 N6E gravestone radar swings. A sophisticated tactical maneuver isn't what the Russian operators observe. What they see is an environment rich with targets. For them, it resembles teenagers attempting to infiltrate a high-security vault by charging through the main entrance. Targets are locked. Engagement permission granted. The night sky ignites. Off their launch rails, massive 48 N-16 missiles roar, in seconds accelerating to Mach 6. In the river valleys, nowhere to hide exists for the Paleonitsia. Their marks are found by the Russian missiles, one by one. In under 30 seconds, Pulse 1 is vaporized. Pulse 2 fares no better. By a combination of long-range S-400S and the rapid-fire 30mm cannons of Kolsher-Panzer S-1 units, it's shredded. Electric is the atmosphere inside the Russian command center. Operators high-five, grinning as though the Super Bowl has already been won by them. An 80% intercept rate has just been achieved. Of the first 16 drones through the initial kill zone, only 3 managed to slip, and those are likely damaged. Another peaceful night. One operator scoffs, in his chair leaning back. Another easy night. The standard procedure of reloading their Panzer tubes begins, on Moscow's tallest building's rooftops completely exposed. The Ukrainian attack's back has been broken, they believe. the lead wolf software trap. But here's the twist that's about to transform their celebration into a strategic nightmare. As a failed attack, what the Russians perceive is actually in lead wolf tactics a masterclass. Hitting the factory wasn't the purpose of those first two pulses. They were sacrificial lambs engineered to compel the entire Russian defense network into the digital void to scream its location. Each time Pulse 1 is pinged by an S-400 radar, a massive electromagnetic torch is created. Each time its cannons are fired by a Panzer, in the freezing air, a thermal fingerprint is left. While the Russian crews are occupied with high-fiving the final pulses of Paleonitsia, the CAD variants with passive radar homing seekers equipped are silently every single coordinate recording the hunters they believe themselves to be, but into the map's brightest targets, they've just transformed themselves. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, the real predators, those two Ukrainian F-16s, are the show watching for the exact millisecond waiting when the Russian defense reaches its most vulnerable state. F-16 pop-up strike and evasion. 4:45 a.m. In the lead F-16's cockpit of survival's cost, the fuel flow meter serves as a grim reminder. For hundreds of miles at 200-foot flying isn't merely exhausting. For the engines, it's a thermal nightmare. At this density, thick, soupy air is what the aircraft fights, 3 times faster than at high-altitude cruise burning fuel. Like running a marathon while through a straw breathing, it is his coordinates the pilot checks. From Moscow's heart, 186 miles. Time has come. Into his stomach, he yanks the stick, a violent pop-up maneuver executing. At the stars, the F-16's nose points as 29,000 pounds of thrust toward 15,000 feet pushes the airframe. This is a desperate attempt to provide the Storm Shadow with enough gravitational potential energy for its long-range glide. Jettison tanks. Into the darkness, 2 empty 370-gallon external fuel tanks fall away, of unnecessary drag stripping the jet. Immediately following, with a heavy thud, the 2 900-pound Storm Shadows release. The missile's wings open with a pop, its microturbo engine ignites, and toward the Salute factory, its autonomous journey begins. This high-value predator to mask, Pulse 3 and Pulse 4 of the Paleonitsia fleet Ukraine unleashes. Toward the capital, 16 more drones screamed, a chaotic wall of noise creating. The Russian defense, however, has ceased celebrating and begun calculating. On the high-flying F-16, the Big Bird search radar has finally a solid track achieved. Simultaneously, with our 37M long-range missiles equipped, a flight of Russian Su-35s at Mach 5 is already vectoring in. Ablaze was the Moscow sky. The Russian S-400 batteries are doing more than just firing the airspace they're saturating. By a wall of steel, pulses 3 and 4 are met. Like flies, one by one, the Paleonitsia are out of the sky swatted. Then the unthinkable occurs. The Storm Shadow. By a Panzer S-1's thermal tracker, the $2 million Invisible Hunter is picked up. At this range, against the freezing morning air, a glowing beacon is the missile's engine heat. The Panzer operator shows no hesitation. Upstreak a pair of 57 times 10 to the power of 6 interceptors. Impact. Short of the target by 40 miles, in a violent thermal event, the Storm Shadow disappears. Inside the F-16, a continuous high-pitched tone is what the APR-39 radar warning receiver screams. A hard lock a Russian interceptor has. To see the missile trail, the Ukrainian pilot doesn't wait. Inverted, he rolls the aircraft and toward the earth at a 60 degrees angle dives back. 9 Gs pulling that into a narrow tunnel of gray turn his vision. At a terrifying 50 feet, he levels off as a shield using the terrain to break the radar lock. He's in retreat. Gone is the first Storm Shadow. Smoking scrap metal are 16 more drones. Of 40 total assets into the kill zone sent so far, 32 have been neutralized. For any observer, like a total catastrophe, this appears. In its fuel reserves, Ukraine has burned a massive hole and for zero gain lost its most expensive weapon. In cheers again, the Russian command centers are erupting, convinced the Ukrainian Air Force's last-ditch effort has just been broken by them. Yet, toward the border as the first F-16 heads back, in the shadows still lurking is the second F-16. The fuel gauge and the clock is pilot watching. Exactly 8 Paleonitsia remain post-5. And this time, just explosives they aren't carrying. The lead Wolf software they're carrying that every single Russian radar frequency that just fired has been quietly recording. About that, though, the Russians have no idea. In their minds, its arsenal and its courage Ukraine has exhausted. Ironically, their guard as they begin to lower Moscow's inner perimeter the final 8 Paleonitsia drones cross. These are the SEAD variants, suppression of enemy air defenses. Silent listeners they are. To the frequencies the Panzer S-1 systems just minutes ago used, their passive radar homing seekers are tuned specifically. Paleonitsia drones blind the Panzer. Suddenly, into a cold-blooded ambush, the Russian Easy Night turns. Near the salute factory on a rooftop, a Panzer operator on his screen sees a flicker. Before even a warning he can shout, out of the clouds at 560 miles per hour, a 700 pounds Paleonitsia screams. At the factory building, it isn't aiming. Straight down the Panzer's spinning radar dish's throat, it's diving. Surgical is the impact. The billion-dollar eyes of the defense system, the drone's 100 pounds warhead disintegrates. One moment a high-tech marvel is the Panzer. The next, a 20-ton paperweight sitting on a Moscow rooftop it is, like a broken toaster sparking. In under 60 seconds, silenced are 3 of these Guardian systems. A tactical catastrophe it is. By those 3 specific units taking out in Moscow's inner shield, a 10-mile wide blind spot Ukraine ripped. Now, in that command center, imagine the panic. Going fuzzy are their screens, being poked out are their eyes, and exactly where the real predators are headed is the gap they just left open. The blind spot exploited Storm Shadow launch. 300 miles away on his tactical data link, the blind spot bloomed the second Ukrainian F-16 pilot sees. A heartbeat he doesn't waste. The stick he yanks to 15,000 feet pops up, and both Storm Shadows picks up. Into the darkness, 2 900 pounds cruise missiles drop. Straight for that smoking hole the Paleonitsia in Moscow's sky just punched. They're heading. Finally realizing are the Russians that the easy targets earlier they shot down were merely the appetizer, and at Mach 0.9 directly toward their heart, the main course is moving. For the ultimate countermeasure, the Russian commander screams, "Code Black, activate the curtains." On every street corner, the salute factory surrounding, massive chemical canisters erupt. Within seconds, under a thick artificial white fog is the entire facility buried. To scatter infrared light designed, a multispectral smoke screen. Simultaneously, with heat noise, high-power IR jammers the area flood, intended to fry any incoming missile sensors, a blinding glare creating. Back leans the Russian commander, crossing his face a cold smirk as the monitors he watches. Blind now are their infrared seekers, he scoffs. Smoke is all they can see. Into a wall of nothing, they're flying. For any normal missile, right he would be. But the 2026 spec Storm Shadow does more than just see, it remembers. This is the ace in the hole everyone misses. With AI-driven DSMAC, digital scene mapping and correlation, Ukraine has upgraded these missiles. For just a heat signature, the Storm Shadow's brain isn't looking. A topographical comparison is running. Against a 3D digital model in its memory stored, the geometric shapes of the buildings it sees compares, even through the smoke. Like trying to find in a total blackout your front door. It's a flashlight you don't need if exactly how many steps from the sidewalk it is you know, and exactly what the handle's shape feels like you know. By a desperate burst of 30 millimeters flak, one Storm Shadow is clipped and into a parking lot tumbles. But at the final waypoint, a violent pop-up maneuver the second one executes. Through the chemical fog, the main assembly hull's unique geometric skeleton it identifies. The missile dives. At the same time, by a storm of mid-range interceptors, the remaining Paleonitsia drones are being shredded. But in war's chaos, for the attacker, even for the defender, a kill can be a hit. A crippled Paleonitsia. By an Igla missile its wings sheared off. Like a 700 pounds flaming spear out of the sky tumbles. The factory roof it doesn't hit. The high voltage substation 50 feet away it hits. A massive electrical arc the impact creates that like a flashbulb lights up the Moscow fog. Into the factory's secondary systems, the surge instantly travels, just as laden with unspent jet fuel. Another shower of burning drone debris into the warehouse slams for turbine testing storing pressurized hydraulic oil. A significant thermal event commences. The hydraulic oil, essentially of liquid energy, a giant vat, ignites and then arrives the storm shadow. Through the assembly hall roof's reinforced concrete at Mach 0.9, the 1,000 pounds missile punches. 10 feet deep into the foundation, the precursor charge tunnels before detonates the main 450 pounds broach warhead. Just an explosion, the result isn't. A structural catastrophe it is. From the storm shadow, the overpressure wave from the hydraulic warehouse, the raging chemical fire meets. Of the salute plant, the roof, where Russia's air power is born, the place, like a cardboard box, begins to fold. Gone is the Russian commander's smirk. His perfect defense failed. He just watched, because against 21st century logic, a 20th century war he was fighting. Of the Sukhoi, the heart has just been ripped open, and only getting started is the fire. Strategic Checkmate. Su-35 Production Holtiv. Over Moscow as the sun begins to rise, to reveal a sight the Kremlin spent billions to prevent. The chemical fog clears. In a fierce orange glow, a 200-foot section of the roof is engulfed. This is the thermal event that made the headlines. Surgical was the storm shadow's impact, to the assembly hall punching a hole, while from the intercepted Helionicia drones, the flaming debris into a persistent high-intensity fire turned the hydraulic testing area. Inside that hole of Russian industry, the Holy Grail sits. Ultra-precise CNC milling machines from Germany and Japan imported before the sanctions hit. With tolerances of less than 1,000th of an inch, these machines carve turbine blades. The only reason the AL-41F1S engines, the moment they hit full afterburner, don't explode. They are. When the roof burns, just the fire that does the damage, it isn't. The smoke, the soot, and onto those delicate machines being dumped the thousands of gallons of corrosive firefighting foam. It's a 5-axis mill, a single microscopic layer of ash can ruin. Level the building Ukraine didn't need to. Inside it, ruin the air quality they just needed to. By the time extinguished is the last flame. For its elite Su-35 engines, Russia's production line for weeks, if not months, has effectively been frozen. True. In the world's most dangerous casino, this was a high-stakes game of poker. With 2 F-16s and a handful of drones, Ukraine walked up to the table, against a house facing off that on the planet had every radar and missile system. Win the whole pot, they didn't. Still standing is the factory, but to change the entire map, with enough of a victory they walked away. Russia's sense of security, Ukraine burned. That no matter how many layers of steel and silicon around a target you wrap, a smarter, more creative opponent in your defense will always find the echo. They proved. So worth the gamble, was it? What do you think? By leaving a comment below, let us know. Make sure to subscribe and that bell hit, because next time at How Into the One Thing Russia is truly afraid of Ukraine is turning old Soviet junk, we're looking.